Great. So, hi guys, welcome to Consult 101, the final module. And this is the first session for this weekend. Profitability, we'll be having our second session on market entry cases tomorrow. So, yeah, hope your experience has been great till now. Hope you have already formed your case groups and are practicing estimates. And with that being said, allow me to introduce our mentor for today, Vishnu. It's Vishnu Harshith. Hi, Vishnu.
Hi, Ayush.
Yeah. So a little bit about Vishnu. So he was the Shastra Evolved core, and he has interned at OYO and UPenn. UPenn is University of Pennsylvania, and he got his way through Bain in placements. So we welcome him, and he'll be explaining you a lot about profitability today. I strongly suggest you stay till the end for the following reason. Rohan, next slide.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the structure for today is first Vishnu will be explaining you the basic profitability framework. We will refrain from getting into a lot of details of the framework, like especially value chain analysis and all, because we feel that there are better resources available, which we have already shared with you. The placement team has already shared with you, and that's like better than what we can do in 15 minutes. So I highly recommend you watching you going through those resources as well. I think I had already shared the video of case interviews cracked on the group, and I expect everyone has done it. Not that it's a prerequisite, but yeah, it will definitely help. Moving on, we'll be discussing one basic case so that you get a good idea of what happens in a normal profitability interview. Then we come to our special case by Vishnu. This case might be a little intimidating, but trust us, this case will clear all your concepts related to profitability framework. And this is the level where you would want to reach when you're case prepping. So I highly recommend stay throughout that case number 2 and try to understand and grasp as much as possible. Then Vishnu will be sharing some tips from his case prep experience. And lastly, as usual, we'll be discussing doubts. So for doubts, please feel free to ping me or Rohan in between the sessions. We would prefer taking doubts in the end, but if you have any urgent doubt without which you feel you cannot move ahead with the session, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask it. So with that, let's begin, and over to you, Vishnu.
Thanks, Ayush. Let's move ahead with this slide. So guys, we'll start with the basic framework of profitability here. We'll make sure that everything that you're seeing on this slide is explained. And when I say a framework of profitability, you guys are not required to use this framework, because I believe that at least like all the people who are at least for sitting for consult should at least make their own frameworks. For example, this framework is something that I have used a couple of times, and I have some other frameworks with me for profitability. But you can feel free to make your own frameworks in such a way that you're comfortable with it. The most important point while you're solving any case is that you're supposed to be comfortable with a particular framework, and that framework need not be universal. It can be something very personal to you, right? And that's the most basic agenda. But here we'll touch upon something framework which is most often used, and you can definitely keep making changes if you want to. Right, so let's start with profitability. That profitability cases usually revolve around the fact that either the company is making losses, and we have to somehow figure out why they're making losses, or sometimes if the interview is a little bit of unconventional type, then they will ask you questions like the company is making too much profits, which also is like kind of a issue. They'll be like, why is the company making too much profits? But that is something very rare. But let's look into why, what exactly profitability cases include. So profits, as simple as it sounds, profits is nothing but revenue minus cost, right? So revenue is nothing but the amount of money that you generate by selling your services or goods, and costs are nothing but the amount of money that you incur while you generate a particular good or a service, right? And we from this stage we are from here on we try to divide this into multiple stages. Like from revenue we go into multiple branches, and from cost, you go to multiple branches. And the reason we have to do it in such a way is because we have to make sure that every problem that every issue that could be there in a particular company is accounted in one of these frameworks, right, or one of these issues. So that's the reason we have to keep splitting in a very structured and organized manner. But before we jump on into the splitting the revenues and costs, it's important to identify some very basic preliminary questions. And these basic preliminary questions will kind of get you an brownie points in your interviews, because most of your, at least you will have a very good idea of where exactly is the case leading to if you ask the right set of preliminary questions. For example, here I think Ayush has given a good set of preliminary questions here. Like for example, since when has the client been facing this issue? It's very important. If it is a 20 years or let's say a big huge time, then we have to understand whether why has the company not approached or not tried to change its policy much before. Or if it's a very recent issue, that means that there could be some specific issue with the company that is causing this particular problem. Second question, what was the trend before? As in, like, were we making like really good profits before and suddenly did we start making losses? Or we were making losses before and did we jump into a huge trench now? Like, we have to understand what were our profits and losses even before this problem occurred, right? And third question, which is very, very important, and I would recommend you to ask this question irrespective of what the case is that is the issue client specific or the industry specific? That means that do we need to understand whether the company that we have, basically our client, do we have issues with the client, or basically the entire industry is facing some issue? If it's an entire industry-wide issue, then the case completely goes away to a different area. And if you don't ask this question at the start, then you will definitely be stuck somewhere 10-20 minutes down the solving the case. So it's very important for you to ask the third question. Fourth question, is there any timeline to solve this issue? Basically, when he mentions about timeline, do we have any specific targets? Is what something we mean? As in, like, do we want to turn over the entire profits in a span of 2 years or 3 years? Do we have something like that? Do we have any specific targets? Would be our agenda, right? And also during the case, we have to make sure to ask questions about I think the questions that Ayush has mentioned here would definitely come as we solve the case. Basically, like, has the revenue been declining or has the cost been increasing? That is when you further start splitting into things, right? So now let's look at the right side of the slide here, and let's start from the top. That is what is driving the decline. That basically means when we talk about whether the profits are declining, there are two things that we talked about, right? Revenues and costs. So which one of the factor is basically causing this? Usually one of them would be a reason, but in some cases it turns out to be that, like, both of them could be a reason, like where revenues are also decreasing and costs are also increasing. And in some cases you would also see that, like, the revenues are decreasing and costs are increasing, both would be quite correlated. So in that kind of scenario, you would want to go with any one of them. It's always good to go with revenues first, at least for me, but it's again very person specific. So, but if at all the interviewer says you that, like, it's revenues is the issue which is causing, or costs are the issue which is causing, then you have to delve into that particular branch, right? So we'll analyze the profit equation, that is revenues and costs. Let's start with the revenues first, right? So let's say the interviewer says you that revenues have been decreasing, the cost remains same, right? So we'll be like, okay, let's look into revenues. So under the revenues, it's very important for you to look into three factors. So what exactly is the revenue? I mean, in a very basic term, you could just say the revenue is nothing but the number of I would use the word goods and services interchangeably, but both are different. I hope you understand. But for the simplicity of explanation, I will use the word goods here. So let's say that the number of goods produced multiplied by the price of the good that you sell, like one good that you sell, right? So this is a very, very, very basic kind of equation for revenue. That is revenue equal to hashtag number of units multiplied by the price per unit, right? But at the same time, it's important that, like, here we're making inherent assumption that the company is having only one good, but that's not right, right? For example, like, let's say a company like ITC has multiple revenue generating streams. That's basically like they produce tobacco, they produce books, they produce multiple other fast moving consumer goods, right? So it's important for you to ask the interviewer at this stage that what are our revenue generating channels. That's basically the third box that you're seeing, the product mix. What exactly is a product mix? And under the product mix, we should also understand what are our the most profitable items and whatever least profitable items. Basically, are we making losses in a specific channel, or are we making losses overall throughout the entire product mix, right? So this is very important for you to understand here. Uh, Now let's look into the price sector. Under the price, we have to understand, like as soon as the interviewer tells you that, hey, we are selling you at this, we are selling our product at this and this price, it's important for you to understand that whether this particular price is same as a competitor, as in like a particular shampoo bottle which is being sold by a client. The same shampoo bottle might be like the price what we sell might be quite high as compared to competitors. In that very case, it is inherent that the consumers might not buy a product, right? So it is important to understand what's the price of that particular product in the entire industry, right? And the second point what we have here is price elasticity. So what's price elasticity? Price elasticity is nothing but the change, what would be the change in the goods consumed if we change the price, right? So basically the delta change in the number of goods that people will consume if we change the price. Basically, to be very to keep it in layman terms, it's basically like now let's say, if we decrease a particular price of a petrol, let's say to, from 105 rupees to, let's say, 60 rupees, you will see that more and more people would start using the petrol, or like they'll consume more and more petrol. But if the petrol price is high, you will see that more and more people would start using the public transport to avoid they start consuming less amount of the goods, right? So that's basically price elasticity. Let's look into the volume section. Under the volume, we have again, like when he says about volume here, it's basically the number of units of the or number of goods that are being sold, right? So under the volume, we could look at like the two things. So if at all revenues are decreasing, then it means that the volume is the number of units might decrease, or the price would have increased, right? So one of these two factors would play a role. Let's say the volume has decreased, then we would have two things like, are we seeing this decrease in volume because the market conditions have changed? That means that, is there any new kind of substitute coming in, or is there any new kind of product coming in which people have thought that now this our product is no more useful? For example, let's take the use of even petrol here itself. Like let's say people have observed that the CNG gas is now more profitable, or like it's more economical, then people will start using petrol less. That means that the petrochemical companies would see that the market has changed completely. People are not anymore interested to buy petrol because there is something else which is better in the market, right? And the next point here is new markets. That is, can we explore economies of scope with entry into adjacent industries? That means that petrol need not be used only in the automobile industries. Petrochemical are used in quite some of chemical industries, like even making like products like soap, right? So can we use our produced goods into adjacent industries, right? So this could be one of the way of how we want to look at the case. And let's say what happens if the volume is increased. That means that, like, is there an overtime? I mean, like, are our companies working overtime to produce more number of goods? And will also look at, are there any leakages? That means that, like, are we wasting any kind of product? I mean, is there a good amount of wastage, right? So all these the points that you're seeing right now are points that you would want to arrive at if at all you are looking at these kind of branches. But you can feel free to please, change the structure accordingly in such a way that you come at with a more organized approach, right? So that's with the revenues. We have discussed each and every cell here. Let's look at the costs, right? Costs will have again.
Uh,
Yes, go ahead.
Vishnu, I am sorry, I'll just pause you for 1 minute. Uh,
Yeah.
I would just like to, give a short 1 minute summary of what has been discussed till now, so that it doesn't become
Yes.
too overwhelming.
Sure. Sure.
So
Sure. No problem.
I'm sure you must have realized by now that a lot of this is stemming from a course that you may have studied, Principle of Economics. Even if you haven't studied it, it's basically logic and common sense that's playing a role here. So we start with what is driving the decline. The interviewer has just told you that, hey, our client is facing profitability issues, the profit is declining, what to do? Common sense, you ask, hey, profit is a function of both revenue and cost. If profit is declining, either the revenue could decline or the cost could increase, or both. What has happened? Usually either the revenues would be declining or the cost would be increasing. That's the usual case. So we have done the revenue decreasing part till now. So let's say the interviewer says, okay, hey, the revenue has been decreasing, what now? So you say, okay, revenue is a function of price, volume, and product mix. So either the price has decreased for the revenue to decrease, or maybe the volumes that are selling might have decreased. It may increase as well, but then other factors would decrease. And then there's the product mix factor that Vishnu explained. So this is kind of what we have done till now. Hope it's not very intimidating and too much for you to take. It's just basic economics that we are dealing with. Yeah, Vishnu, you can continue.
Yeah, I think as Ayush said, I mean, I just hope that we're not going overboard every stage. But as I said, the important part here to notice that the points that mentioned here or the framework that is mentioned here is not something that you should or like you want to use. You can feel free to like I think the framework which would be common for all is still the layer that you can see the price, volume, and product mix. It that is the layer till I think everyone would be having a very similar structure, similar framework. Beyond that is something what every student or every person should write it down for their own personal for their own comfort, right? So this is something what we have made, but you can feel free to change it accordingly for your own comfortability, right? So let's look into the cost section. That is basically we have again three particular things. Costs basically include what? I mean, two main kinds of costs would be there, right? Fixed costs and variable costs. I'll just give a one-line introduction for both of them. Fixed costs are costs which are not dependent on the number of units you produce, and variable costs are the dependent on number of units you produce, right? So this is the very basic definition of fixed and variable costs. And the third one is using unusual expenses. These are something like miscellaneous expenses where you would see like write-offs or lawsuits or anything which you think that can't be included in these two could you can like probably dump it in here, right? So now when you look at the cost section, you can ask the interviewer that, hey, have we seen any increase or decrease in the variable cost or fixed cost? Let's say the interviewer talks to you about like, hey, we have seen that our fixed costs have increased, right? So we look at uh, what would be the how could a fixed cost increase, or what would be its driving factors, right? So let's look at the fixed cost. There could be one reason would be labor cost, right? Under the labor cost, we could see unions. Basically, the number of people employed are probably asking for a higher salary, or we could see that the benefits employed to employees have been increased, because of which we are incurring greater amount of cost for employing people. Or we could see second cell here is automation. Basically, the number of machines that we use. Basically, like, are we having heavy machinery that is basically employed here, right? So this is have you started using a new machine, or basically like advanced technology is being used or something like that? Like, have you tried to incorporate something, some different kind of plant, right? So this could be the reasons why a cost would increase. It's also important to understand here the whether have we added any additional capacity, or the point that I think we mentioned is economies of scale, right? So the economies of scale is nothing but something like you want to measure this particular cost, this like fixed cost or variable cost per unit wise. That means that, let's say I have started generating or producing more amount of goods. If I started producing more amount of goods, would my fixed cost per unit decrease? Right. So a very holistic way of looking the entire case would be somewhat like this. Like I would usually do this for my case solving purposes. That I always take a product and I ask the interviewer that, hey, what's the selling price of this, or basically what's the revenue generated for one particular product, right? At the same time, I will ask the interviewer that, hey, what is the fixed cost that I incur for this one particular product, and what is the variable cost that I incur for this one particular product. So looking at all these three factors will help you to understand that, like, hey, if at all can I if I decrease the fixed cost, or if I decrease the variable cost, will my profits increase, right? So economies of scale is exactly focused on this fact that, like, if we increase the number of units or the number of goods produced, how will the fixed cost per unit and variable cost per unit change, right? So it's always very important for you to understand how will the cost, or how will the fixed cost and variable cost change if at all we increase or decrease the number of goods, right? So in most cases, what happens is that if you increase the number of goods produced, and your fixed cost per unit will decrease, which will in turn help you in getting more profits, assuming that the number of goods you produce has good amount of demand present in the market, right? So That's the section of fixed costs. There are a lot of other things in fixed costs, something like, there's some utility, or let's say insurance, or renting a particular space. Like, there are a lot of areas where fixed costs come into play. You can feel free to Google them, or like find out in other frameworks. But the important part here to note is that fixed costs play a very important role. And let's look into the variable costs. Right, under the variable cost, it's quite simple. Variable cost is nothing but it's basically like, with by collecting all the raw materials, you're supposed to generate a product. So what is the cost of the raw material that you basically procure? Right. So how do we understand, or how do we come up with the raw material cost? So to come to this very basic frame, not a framework, but probably a kind of strategy is used here, where we use something called value chain. Value chain is uh, nothing but the journey of a product from scratch to the consumer. Right. So basically, let's again take the example of petrol. Right. So basically, let's take the example of petrol, and let's say a client is Reliance. Right. Reliance does a lot of petrochemical job. Right. So going to the seashores and extracting the petrol from the seabeds, would that is the first step, what they do. Next, they transport it through pipelines to the industries. Third, they have to do good amount of pre-processing before they get petrol and other kind of chemicals out from the oil, right? And after that, once the petrol is out, they have to transport it to the industries, or the petrol pumps, right? So, and from petrol pumps, it goes back into the users' vehicles, right? So it's important that the understanding the journey of the petrol from the seabed in the ocean till the tank of the vehicle is important. And when you try to go step by step, you can start listing on points where and all costs will be involved, right? So we will try to look at this in a more detailed section while we solve a case, and we would also look at what would be its cost drivers. Basically, how would at what step would the money be required, and where would we be incurring more and more cost, right? Yeah, that's with the cost section. Ayush, do you want to summarize here again? You're on mute, Ayush.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry. I had a doubt.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
go ahead.
so is that if there's a product about which we do not know, let's say petroleum, we do not know
Mhm.
its journey, is it will it be impossible for us to picturize its value chain, or can it be done through logic?
No, it can definitely be done through logic. I mean, it's you need not know the value chain completely. I mean, especially in the case interviews, it is okay for you not to know the value chain of every product, right? For example, if you ask me what is the value chain of jewelry, I mean, let's say gold. I mean, like, I personally don't know how exactly jewelry is made, because I only know that gold is mined, and after that, I don't know what exactly is the process and how it comes to me, right? So if you don't know this, you can start letting it with, like, you can definitely tell the interviewer that, hey, I don't know this, but I will try to relate the gold with, let's say, a simple product like utensil, because, like, although both are not very similar, but both of them are used by using a metal, and they are finally cast into a different product, right? You could try to relate with a very similar product and use your common sense and logic there. But if you feel that you have no idea, you can feel free to ask the interviewer. And uh, this asking the interviewer won't help, or like won't give you any negative points, because it is completely okay for you not to know the process. And it's always very, very, very good for you to ask that, yes, I don't know, and can you help me in this process? But before you ask, it's important that you give an idea that, hey, I know this, and I don't know this. Can you help me in filling my holes? Like, can you help me in filling the places where I don't know, right? So this is very important. Ask the interviewer if you don't know, is what I would say, right?
Cool, cool. Thank you.
Right. I think we could move on to the next slide.
Yeah. So hopefully it's clear now that the profitability framework is not some fixed framework. It will vary from
Exactly.
client to client, and you can design it in your own way. What is important is to understand the logic, as Vishnu said. So I will just demonstrate a very, very simple case for you to understand how does the framework work, and what happens in an actual profitability case interview. After that, Vishnu will be explaining a case in much more detail, and that will add much more value. But let's begin with this. So you're in an interview, and your interviewer has said that, hey, the Delhi, one of the stations in the Delhi metro network is facing profitability issues. Could you help? Okay, and the station is CP. CP is basically Connaught Point. Anyone who lives in North India would know Connaught Point. It's equivalent to Adyar or Velachery in Chennai. Basically, a very popular area. So that particular station in the entire network is facing profitability issues. The profitability has been declining. What will you do? So it becomes very important to first understand about your client. So here we already know that yeah, the client is a metro station, and the trains come, passengers come, they get into the train. Sounds very basic, but it's important for you to comprehend this. Another thing that you would want to visualize in your head is that on a station not only trains and passengers are there, but there are some shops as well. So that's a basic visualization of what's happening. Now you ask, since when has the profitability declined? So if the interviewer says that it has been declining for, let's say, the past 2 to 3 months or a year, then what you can comprehend out of it is that there was some change made in the model in the last 1 year that led to the profitability declining. But if the interviewer says that it has been happening for a long time, or let's say since the beginning, then there's a fundamental issue. Basically, that's a hint that there's a fundamental issue that needs to be solved. So in this case, the issue has been there since the beginning. Next question you ask, as Vishnu has said, is it an industry-wide issue or just for a client? Similarly here, is it true for all other stations or just one particular station? So again, in this case, it's just for the Connaught Place station, Connaught Point. I mean, yeah, Rohan, next slide. Yeah. So again, very hefty framework is there. No need to get intimidated. It's all logical. So you say, okay, the profit has been declining. Profit is a function of revenue and cost. Either the revenue could decrease or the cost could decrease. Could you tell me what's happening? And the interviewer says, hey, yeah, the revenues have declined. Okay. So you quickly visualize in your head again, what are the sources of revenue for a metro station? They are definitely the tickets, the advertisement boards there, and as I said, the shops or the outlets there. So you ask, these are the three sources of revenue. Has there been a decline in any one particular source, or is this or has all the sources declined? So the interviewer says, okay, the source of revenue from the outlets have declined, so we are getting less money from the outlets. Cool. So you say the number of outlets, the money that comes from outlet is basically the number of outlets into the rent that one outlet gives. Again, very logical step. So you ask, has the number of outlets declined, or the rent per outlet is declining as compared to other stations? So the interviewer says that, hey, no, rent is fine. There's an issue with the number of outlets at the Connaught Point station. Okay. So now, what is the number of outlets a function of? The total area of the station into the area per outlet into the percentage of occupied outlets. So you say, is the area of the station only low? Then there will be obviously lesser number of outlets. Or you say, is the area per outlet given less as compared to other stations, or is the percentage occupancy less? So the interviewer says, okay, the percentage occupancy is less. Could you further investigate? Okay. So the percentage of occupied outlets is less. Why could that be the reason? Why are outlets not coming to the Connaught Point station? Are they expecting a lesser amount of revenue? Are they incurring more costs as compared to other areas? Or is there a problem with the rent agreement? So he says, no, the expected revenue is fine since Connaught Point is a famous station. You generally expect a lot of revenue. Incurred costs are at par with other stations. There is a problem with the rent agreement. So you further break down the elements of rent agreement. What are the various elements of a rent agreement? There's duration, there's lock-in period, and there's rent amount. Lock-in period is basically that at least for this much amount of period, you cannot, remove your shop or back out. You'll have to pay the rent for at least this amount of period. So the interviewer says, yeah, there's a problem with the lock-in period. So you have identified, okay, yeah, it's Connaught Place. Thank you. So you have successfully identified the problem of why the root cause of why the profitability has been declining for the Connaught Place station. So yeah, and then he'll ask you for some recommendations. You can say maybe decrease the lock-in period, or if you want more lock-in period, then decrease the amount of rent, whatever. The recommendations are not that a big factor in an interview. What matters is your structure and your approach. So yeah, And I'm sure one more thing you can realize here is how important is it to consider all the factors. Who could have thought that the profit of a metro station is decreasing because the lock-in period of the outlets at those stations is an issue? So many a times the root cause is pretty unexpected, and you have to reach there in a very logical way. So now Vishnu will be going through another much more detailed case of a beer manufacturing plant whose again profitability is declining. I highly recommend you to stay and go through the entire case with Vishnu for the next 25 to 30 minutes. This is the level, I repeat, this is the level that you want to be at when you're case prepping. Over to you, Vishnu.
Thanks, Ayush. I think as Ayush said, I mean, this the coming case is slightly long, but trust me, they won't ask you this in an interview. I mean, the case that they usually ask in the interview is like what Ayush has just explained. It would be quite simple. It would just have a three layers of depth, and they won't expect you to go much deep. But the case that I'm going to explain you is that it has like 5 to 6 layers of depth. The reason why we are doing this case is because that if at all you are able to go till 6 layers of depth in the case with complete logic and structure, then you could definitely do even with 3 layers, right? So this is a level that you would probably want to be at if at all you're solving cases. That even if the interview goes for like 45 to 50 minutes, you still don't want to lose your structure and be logical at every step. Right? So that's the reason we will try to look at quite a bit of lengthy case, but this case definitely is not one which would be asked in an interview. It would be quite simple, right? So let's start looking at it. Like our client is a beer manufacturing client, and it has we have seen that their profits have been declining over 1 year, right? So what would be our preliminary questions? So first we would ask about the company, that where is it based out? Let's say my answer is Chennai. It's based just outside the Chennai area. And next, what would be its business model? When we ask about what is business model, you could probably be more specific, like what are its revenue generating streams. Then they would probably answer that we have only one type of product, like one beer only we produce. So and we don't have anything else. And what's the business model? Then they would explain that yes, basically like that would come in the flow of the product. So they look at first what's the product about. So we say that yes, it's an alcohol product. That's only one beer bottle is being produced. And do we have any more information about them? Like when you talk about anything more about them, it's important for you to ask a bit more specific questions. Something like, let's say, uh, is there any legal issues with the product, or have we have every permissions required for the product? Something like that. And next important would be to understand the flow of the product. That is, are we the where do we lie in the value chain, or where do we lie in the entire chain of producing product, right? So in that, our answer would be that we manufacture the product by having the raw materials, then we distribute it to the stores, and we have our own stores, so we sell the product. So everything from start of manufacturing it and selling it to the consumer is completely ours. So it's basically like a completely exclusive type of product. And you could ask very generic questions like, since when has the profitability declined? That's basically like I've already told you, past 1 year. And yeah, of course, very very important question as an industry wide or a client issue. We would my answer for this would be that it's just a client issue. Only we are facing this kind of an issue, right? Uh, then we would start looking at the other areas. Let's go ahead. Oh, actually, sorry, it's actually an industry-wide issue here, not a client issue. I mean, I have to correct my statement there. So it's basically an industry-wide issue, and we will try to look at it why it is an industry-wide issue as we go, right? Okay, let's go ahead. Uh, as said earlier, uh, the yellow color boxes are the boxes which we won't go into, but you should mention in your structure. And the red color boxes are the ones which we would go into, layer by layer, right? So let's start with the profits. As simple as it sounds. What's profit? Revenue minus cost. Revenues haven't changed, right? That we will ask with the interviewer. And next we will see the cost, right? So we will see that the costs have increased in the past 1 year. Why has the cost increased, right? So again, cost will again split into two very basic things. We would ask the interviewer that, like, okay, once the cost has increased, we would want to look at the drivers of the cost, or like what are the reasons of the cost increasing, right? You will see 2 points: fixed costs and variable costs. What would come under fixed cost and what would come under variable cost, right? So let's first look into the variable cost. Variable cost is nothing but the number of beers produced multiplied by the variable cost per beer. And at this stage, you would ask the interviewer that, hey, have we started, increase in number of units produced because that would increase the cost, or have the variable cost per unit increased, right? And the interviewer would say you that no, both of them have remained same. That means that the variable cost entire section has not changed, right? So we'll be like, okay, so variable section has not changed. That means that the fixed section might have some issue, right? So under the fixed section, we'll look into like three different things, right? The machinery, which is used to probably produce the beer, and the labor that is used to produce this, and the utility. Utility might include something like the rent of the plant, or the land owned, or insurance, or anything like that, right? So you could probably structure this one a bit more better. Maybe I have not done in the best possible manner, but for me, I felt that this was enough for me. But in my opinion, you could definitely structure this in like maybe 5 to 6 branches more. There are only 3 branches here, and trust me, the better you structure, the more brownie points you get in your interview, right? So this is the place where the interviewer starts judging you, how well you are splitting each and every section, right? Because the better you split, the easier for you it is to find a problem. Right? In my case, it was easy for me to find a problem, that is the labor, right? So I will ask like, hey, have you increased our machines? They'll be like, the interviewer would be like, no, our machines have remained the same and it's working fine. And the utility costs have also remained the same. Our labor costs have increased, right? So when we see labor costs, we will be like, okay, if the labor costs have increased, that means that the labor cost could be written in a formula where number of labors multiplied by cost incurred per labor. It's very very important for you to write every particular section into a formula, right? I'm like, formulating a particular section would definitely make your entire process easier, and that would help you in arriving at a solution at a much faster rate. And it's important, like, I'm not saying that you have to solve the case in a very short period of time, but the if you try to structure it in a better manner, you would be able to solve the case in the given time frame of 30 minutes. Usually interview would be just like 25 to maximum 20 to 25 minutes. I mean, sometimes it might go to 30 minutes, right? So you would want to solve the case in that stipulated time, so you want to formulate every section, right? So we look at what cost per labor. So we'll ask like, have the number of labors increased, right? Then the answer would be no. And at this stage, I would like, it's important for you to understand that when I say the number of labors increase, that's no. But at the same time, it's important for you to understand whether are the same number of labors present in the plant, right? That means that, let's say there are 100 people, including me, Ayush, and Rohan in the plant, who are as laborers working for that month of July. And in the month of August, we see that Ayush, and Ron, all three have resigned the job, and they have hired 3 more new people, and still the number of laborers are same. That means the number of labors are same, the people present in the labors are not same, right? So it's important for you to ask that particular question also in this number of labors part, right? So the number of labors might have not changed, but the people who are working in the month of July and the people working in the month of August are not the same. That means there have been new people, some people who have resigned, and some new people have been added into the labor section, right? But on a holistic view, you will never observe the change in it, right? So it's very important for you to ask this. This is the place where usually people tend to miss. But let's after getting this information from here, we look into the cost per labor. Has the cost per labor increased? They would be like, yes, the cost per labor has increased. So at this stage, it's not okay for you to directly jump into where and all costs are involved, because it's important for, like, the labor also is like quite categorized to multiple ways. I mean, the cost per labor might have increased, but only for some specific set of labor people, not for all, right? So people usually from this stage jump on to the fact that, like, where and all cost per labor included, right? So it's not okay to do that. You have to understand what type of labors are there and where exactly cost per labor has increased, right? So what type of labors would be there here? We would see the drivers. So in a particular manufacturing plant, we would see drivers who would be basically taking the goods, like getting raw material from one section to other section, and taking it from somewhere else to somewhere. One is driver job, one is industrial job, like all the people who work in the shops of the industries are the industrial fellows, and third would be security. Right? So these three kinds of labors are there. You could definitely categorize into more sections of people. Right? I mean, this is a very very This is my approach of doing it, but you can definitely make it a bit more, elaborate or broader way of doing this, right? So let's look at. So I would ask the interviewer that, hey, I have these three sections of labor. Is there any decrease in a particular set of people? Right? So you would see like, hey, drivers. Then the interviewer would say that we would see that a lot of drivers. We would see the cost per labor in the driver section has increased, right? So why has the driver section increased? Let's go to the next slide here. So you would see that the from the driver cost. Now again, we would see a big amount of structure coming here, but you don't need to worry here. It's all the structure has come solely because we want to keep it as logical as possible so that you can understand much better manner, right? And it's important for you to give the structure to the interviewer, that to tell you that, hey, I'm covering every possible section of driver cost, so there could be no problem or no issue which is not covered in this framework, right? So under the driver costs, we would look at three things. How could, like, let's say, like under the driver costs, as you know, before Ayush said, we won't know what exactly costs are included in the driver costs, but let's try to keep it very logical, right? I mean, because I think most of us won't know what exactly costs are involved in for a particular driver being involved in the job, right? Let's do one thing. Let's try to relate a driver cost to your placement process, right? Right after you get a job, what happens after you get a job? Okay, most of you are like 19 batch. Let's say interns, right? What happens right after you get an intern? Three things would be there, right? First, to come, or like for the companies to come to the campus and hire you, they have to pay a certain amount to the internship team, or like, let's say, they have to pay a certain amount to the entire, they have to spend some amount of money to basically like fly down from their respective places, come to campus and do a couple of things, right? So that basically hiring cost is one. That is, before the driver is hired or before an employee is hired, hiring cost is involved. Next, what else would be the cost which would be before the joining? The training cost. Basically, like right after you join in your full-time role, you would be trained for like a month or so. So the cost involved in training is there. Third, the onboarding cost. Onboarding cost includes something like the uniforms or the ID cards or the bags and all the goodies that they give you. So all these three costs will come before you officially join the company, right? So what happens while you join the company, right? Again, there are two kind of things. As a full-time role, you will have a monetary benefits and non-monetary benefits. Under the monetary, you will see, like, of course, salary plus bonus every year. Very quite obvious that as an employer you will get that. And non-monetary, like you will have in basically like medical facilities, HRA, house rent allowances, food, everything like that, right? This would come in your compensation cost. And same thing, if you try to relate it with the driver, for driver, the most important thing would be what? Safety, because he's at a very risky job, and the medical facilities, right? So I have categorized those 2 points here, and that's while they're working during the in the company, that while they're working. And next section would be what happens once they retire or leave the firm, right? You will give gratuity. Gratuity is something you can probably Google it, but in one probably I'll just give a basic definition. Gratuity is nothing but right after you retire or leave the company, you will get a lump sum amount of money into your bank. That's basically gratuity. You can find out the reason why later. Next is pension. If it's a government job, that's you will get a pension, and you will also get some bonus after you retire. And so this is what post working happens. So if you see, I didn't know what exactly the cost of drivers are there. How would a driver be hired? But I've tried to relate it with my personal experience of what happens right after you get a job, right? So it's important for you to just try to draw correlations between one particular job to something very logical what you have experienced. So right after I gave this structure to the interviewer, he was very happy with that. He was like, okay, fine, because this is very very similar to for any employee. I have not been very very particular for a driver. It's quite common for any kind of a job, right? So after giving the structure, I have asked that, hey, have you seen any change in the pre-working cost area? Then they would be like, interviewer was yes. And then I've given the 3 points, that is hiring, training, and onboarding. So in that, the interviewer was like, yes, we have seen the training cost has increased. So basically, at this stage, we are at a place where we have seen that training the drivers has seen an increase in the cost, right? So why has the training cost increased? So what would be the training cost for a particular employee? For a particular firm, right? It would be the number of people training, number of people being trained multiplied by cost per trained employee, right? So let's say we have 100 employees. We want to train them with a particular cost. We will be like number of people multiplied by cost per training, right? So this is I've again formulated our cost into a two factors or two parameters here: number of people and cost per training. Then I would ask like, hey, have we increased the number of people or have we seen an increase in cost per training? Then the interviewer was like, we have not seen any change in the cost per training, but the number of people have increased. So it's now let's observe the case a bit more clearly here. I've said the number of people being trained have increased, but if you see in the previous slide, I've said that the number of people were same. Why is this? That clearly means that the people are basically are leaving the company and new people are being added, because of which the number of freshers or the number of trainees in the company are increasing. But still, total number of employees in the firm still remain the same. That means that like it is becoming a big issue for the plant to keep on training more and more people, because we are kept on hiring more and more people, right? So more and more people are joining our firm. So why did suddenly people suddenly increase in this stage, right? So again, we split into two things here. Have we or have we like fired people, or like has the attrition increased? The attrition basically means that we're leaving people, or like we're kicking out people, right? Have we kicked out people, or are the people leaving the job? Why are we basically hiring new people, right? So that here, then when I asked this question to interviewer, he was like, no, we are not firing people, but the drivers themselves are leaving our job, right? So now we have come to the root cause of drivers are leaving job. That's the issue. So usually case ends at this level. I mean, like, this is place where you would see that, like, people are leaving the job, right? But we would go one more depth into this, like, from this stage. Yeah, go ahead. Let's go to the next slide. Like, so this is something what we try to add extra here so that you guys get a good idea. So why would a person leave a job, right? What kind of issues would be there? I mean, again, at this stage you can again starting in a very personal, in a very, from your personal experience, why would you particularly leave, let's say since you are like, from 19 batch, let's say, like, why would you leave a particular POR, right? Why would you leave a particular, Shastra, Sarang, or Eastern, anything like that? Why would you want to leave it? There could be two reasons. One, you don't like that particular organization, or you personally don't think that you are fit, or like you are not gaining any specific skills from that POR, right? So if that's the case, then I've again given the very same logical explanation to the interviewer, that I think there could be two reasons: one, company specific and person specific. So when I gave this, then the interviewer asked me to list down all the factors under both of them. Although he knows what is the answer, he wants me to still categorize, or like, segregate under each section, solely because he wants to see how well I am at my structuring, right? So under the company specific, what could be the things? Like, the environment is not good, the culture is not good, I'm not feeling safe here. When I feel safe, I mean, like, it means that if there are risky kind of jobs, then you want a good amount of safety facilities, and you're not satisfied with the company's goals or company's things, and you maybe a reason could be like workload. You are feeling like, like you're being overloaded with work, right? This could be one reason. So the company specific issues, the company is dumping a lot of work, or all these are like issues which company could solve by changing their policies, right? So second would be person specific. Person specific would be the areas where you said where individually you would have some issues. First major issue, what would a person have? Money, right? Basically, like, you are getting quite less pay, you're being underpaid, or you're basically having very less money. Second, that you might have to travel a lot of distance to probably come to your work location, right? Work location is a very important factor for all these plants or industry jobs, right? And third would be other issues. You could include all the other miscellaneous issues in this, right? So when I asked this, then the interviewer was like, yes, the drivers feel that they're being underpaid. Right? At this stage, you can't give an answer that, hey, okay, fine, let's increase the salaries, because if you tell that, then basically you're again increasing the cost, and the costs are already high. So what is the point of increasing the salaries and increasing our cost further? That basically will decrease the profits even further, right? So that's not our answer to this. We'll be like, okay, why do the drivers feel the money which is being given to them decrease? So at this stage, we'll ask them, like, has this how are our salary compensation costs across the industry? Are other factories giving more, or are we giving are we just really similar to what other factors are giving? So at this stage, the interviewer would be like, yes, the all the other industries are also facing a very similar issue. They're also giving the same amount of money as we are giving as to a particular driver. So it's not a very client specific issue, it's a basically industry wide issue, that drivers generally feel that they are earning less money if they are employed at a particular plant. then you'll be like, okay. So when I tell this, it doesn't mean that your problem ends there. You have to understand, like, why do specifically drivers feel that they're undervalued? So there could be some reason, right, why they are feeling that they're undervalued. So you would start looking at what other options do drivers have, that they are comparing our compensation with that particular new alternative, that they're feeling that, yes, the compensation given in the present company is less and the alternative has a better compensation, right? So we look at what other, like, let's say a person has a driver skills or driving skills, what jobs can he pursue? One, that is joining an industry and he's getting, let's say, some amount of compensation which he feels that he's that's not enough for him. What are other jobs he has? There are three kinds of jobs here: self, government, and private. So self is nothing but, like, you are employing yourselves in a taxi kind of a business, where you would see that, like Ola, Uber, where you have your own car registered in the platform and earn money. Second, government, like, enroll themselves in the government jobs, like any of, like, there's a lot of government jobs. Government jobs is self-explanatory, right? You enroll yourself in a government job, you get a lot of benefits plus decent amount of money. Third is private, what our client is, right? So enrolling yourself in a private firm. They realize, or all the drivers have realized, that the joining or getting self-employed is much profitable as compared to a government or private, because in self you get more amount of money. It depends on how much amount of effort you put more effort in driving throughout the day, you work more amount of time, you get more amount of money. It's quite linear relationship, right? And flexibility as in, like, your work hours are quite flexible. You can work from, let's say, from 3 a.m in the midnight to 2 p.m in the afternoon, like no one really cares, right? So the drivers have realized that they have a very nice alternative of having a very good flexibility of their working hours. They can earn more money by spending more amount of time, and they can, and also they need not travel far from home. They can work around in their own particular area, right? So by realizing that they have these three particular factors, drivers have realized that yes, there is the other alternative of self-employment is much more profitable than joining a private industry as a driver. So that is the reason we are seeing the drivers are leaving the jobs, and that is the reason we are seeing that the training, hiring new drivers is increasing the training costs, and that is the reason we are seeing that the fixed cost of training them has increased, and that is the reason we are seeing that the overall cost has increased, and that is the reason we are seeing the profits have decreased. So you can see that we have started from profits decreasing of a particular plant, and the reason has come down to that Ola, Ubers have come into the system, and then self-employment has become the new talk of the town, and people thought that, or drivers thought that, it's okay to leave the job and go to this kind of firms. Right? So this, starting from a particular decrease in profits to coming till this and in a very structured approach, is very important. Although in the interview you won't go to this level, I mean, like, they won't expect you to go to, like, this is like, I think, six level of cases, six layers are there, but I think you would maximum go to three layers. Probably you would stop at the trainee cost has increased, or probably you would stop at the drivers are leaving. I mean, like, probably at one of these two stages, the interviewer would ask you to stop and summarize the case, right? So this is the place where you would, like, you have finally understood why exactly the company is facing a decline in profits. As basically that drivers in the company are leaving the job for some other good option. Right? At this stage, the interviewer might ask you to give some recommendations of how you want to improve it. You can, when they ask you the recommendations, take some time, and then you could probably come with some creative ideas. Recommendations, something what they usually don't tend to, like, give much importance, but if you give very good recommendations, that will give you brownie points. It's very important. They'll judge you mostly on the basis of how well you have come from the profits declining to drivers leaving the jobs. So at this stage, if they ask you recommendations, you could probably tell them, like, if you could offer them different kinds of flexible work hours, because you can't increase the money, that would decrease the profits. If you give them some other kind of non-monetary incentives in some other fashion, or maybe job, like, you could always talk about, like, maybe the company could talk about assurance of the job for a 10-year period, 10-20. Let's say I tell them, like, a driver who is employed on this particular date will not lose his job for 20 years. Like, that is a good assurance period, and any employee would be okay with it, because self-employed is very risky. Like, for example, let's say in the pandemic times right now, Ola and Uber are making huge losses solely because they don't have people coming in, right? So if you give them 20 years of assurance period, you'll be working, such kind of offers, such kind of incentives would gain back their trust and they'll be working in the company. Like you can give multiple recommendations like this. That is something what I would leave it to you guys. But this is what I would probably expect you guys to come to. Like basically, like if you can have structure to like 6 layers or like 5 to 6 layers of the case, then that means that you would definitely do your cases well in your entire interviews or in your case practice sessions, right? So this is what I have. Anything else that you think I should add, Ayush here?
No, I think it was very overwhelming already.
Yes, yes,
I
I
mean,
can understand.
who
I mean, I hope
who
it's
would
recorded, right? So I think they can watch it again.
yes, who would
Yes.
have ever thought at the beginning that the profits of a beer plant are decreasing because their drivers are leaving the jobs because they find Ola Uber more comforting.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. See, although
So
this might not seem very logical, but the reason why one of my senior gave me this case is because he wanted to test me whether how good I was if the interviewer keeps grilling me for 45 to 50 minutes. So maybe he made this case up. I don't think so. I don't know the source of this case. I mean, he gave me. So I personally feel that he made the case up completely on his own. So yeah.
So yeah, I'm sure, guys, you must have realized by now why is this the level that you need to be at if you are case prepping. And another thing that I would like to add is I hope you realize the magic of structure. From where have we come to where what, from where profits decline to what root cause have we come to. And one more thing is, some of you asked me that, hey, I'm not sure if I'm a management consulting enthusiast. Would solving these cases or would solving estimates help me? Yes, they will definitely help you in answering any type of question in any type of interview. Being structured, being a good problem solver always helps. I'll give you an example. I was asked in my Nomura interview, why are the stock markets rising even though there's a pandemic going on? Now, an unstructured answer would be, hey, the stock markets are rising because AstraZeneca ka price is increasing, Reliance ka price is increasing, this ka price is decreasing, but that does not have a lot of effect. And overall, people have a very good positive outlook, so the stock markets are increasing. That's an unstructured answer. You're not wrong. Let me mention, by saying all this, you were never wrong. But there was no conclusion that can be made from this answer. There was no analysis. A structured approach would have been, hey, the stock markets are increasing because there are certain sectors that are driving the stock markets up. There are FMCG sectors, for example, Reliance. It's bringing in a lot of capital from outside India, and that's causing its price to increase. There is pharma sector. There is a hope that these pharma companies are going to bring vaccine. People are very optimistic about it, and hence the stock prices have increased. There's IT sector. Hey, there because of work from home, their variable costs have decreased a lot. They don't have to rent the works. They're not paying for workspace anymore, or the benefits of a workspace given to employees. So that those costs have also decreased. So hence their profits are increasing, their stock prices are increasing. Moreover, as time is passing by, a lot of costs that people incur have decreased because they are staying at home. They probably have more money at their disposal to invest, and once people start investing, the stock market also starts going up. So you see, this is a much more logical way. This is in no way related to case solving, but you can answer any question in a structured manner if you have practice. And this is the kind of practice that you need. Not that this is necessary, but having this would be good.
Exactly. And also adding on to what Ayush said here, a structured approach would help you in coming to a root cause issue wherever it lies. For example, what I mean here, like let's say an issue the decrease in profits could be of a reason something like the let's say the workload of a particular of the labors have increased, right? So even that particular factor is also accounted in our structure, right? So every you should probably create a structure in such a way that all the problems or all the root causes which could cause a decline in the profits should be accounted in your overall structure. That elaborate or that exhaustive your structure should be when you try to do it. I mean, like that is something what you should aim for. I mean, like I personally, I don't think that I have come to that level anytime, but I think you all should Like if you try to aim for that, you will try to be as messy, as say mutually exhaustive. Like you should be like as exhaustive as possible in your structure. If you try to aim for that, that you make the structure as broad as possible and going as depth as possible in every places, then every issue which could cause a problem to the company should be accounted in your structure, and that could definitely help you in solving the cases much better. Right? So that is the reason it's important for you to have a very good structure. That will help you in coming down to a root cause of anything. I mean, like you could probably come down to root cause, which could be like completely not related to what we are right now. Today we are right now drivers leaving the job. There could be issue of machines not working and new technology has come, like something very different, right? So if your structure is good, then you would account for both such kind of issues, right? So that's the reason why you have to have a good structure.
So yeah, that's a good advice, Vishnu. So yeah, in the interest of time, I know we are slightly over time here. We were supposed to end by 5 p.m., but we'll definitely close in the next 5 to 6 minutes. Coming to another very important section of our session, Vishnu, could you share some valuable tips and pitfalls?
Sure, definitely. I think let's first talk about the tips here, right? See, the first thing with the tip is it's important for to understand that case solving is not rocket science, right? I mean, this is not something very difficult. When people say that I am not, am I for management consulting? Am I like the questions like, am I good for management consulting? All those things are definitely something that you have to ask and know more about management consulting. But the questions like, will I be able to prepare for management consulting? Am I that good to prepare to management? That all those questions are not really something what I would want you to ask yourself. Anyone can literally prepare for management consulting. That is the reason why I'm saying this statement is because if you see how I have solved cases, I have not used any kind of any pre-knowledge or some kind of knowledge that I've gained before, right? Can you hear? Hello.
Yeah, you're audible. Yes.
Okay, fine. So all these points, like it's this entire the concept of case solving is not something very it's not something limited to set of people. It's very broad. Anyone can learn it. That's point number one. Just have confidence. Second point, what I would say is while you're solving cases, uh, try to solve one particular case in multiple ways. As in, let's say you have solved this case. I have shown you the example of this case. You can take the same example and try to solve the case in a different way, in such a way that you would observe, you come with a completely different structure. If you think you can't do that, do with a friend. That's the reason why people do case groups. You would see how your other friend is doing the same case. You would see a completely different structure. Then you could definitely see that multiple structures are there for same set of case. And the third reason would be to, well, the third tip for probably what I would tell you is like, while you're structuring your cases entirely, make sure that you're mutually or like you're exhaustive in listing on all sets of issues, or like you're covering all the bases, right? Uh, Once you feel that you have covered all the bases, I think you will feel confident, and it should be good enough for you to present that structure to the interview. Right? I think these are three major tips that I would give you. And the pitfalls usually come at the uh, places where the question becomes slightly vague, as in the interview becomes slightly unconventional. Are you guys listening to some noise here, or is it only me?
Uh,
Yeah, I think now it's fine. Yeah. So, like the pitfalls would be the places where you feel where the interview or the case question goes slightly vague. That when I mean vague, it means like like for example, once I got a case which had case like I mean, this is a very vague case. I mean, this is one of the case with I've done with my Bain buddy. He's like, your client is an aspiring candidate for Saran Kalsik, and you are his election manager. What's your strategy? Like it's quite vague. I mean, when he gave his case, I was like, okay. I mean, like none of my frameworks would work, right? So here is where you could fall. I mean, so that is the reason it's important for you not to sit or not to stick to a specific framework. Understand or analyze how a framework is made, understand the beauty of it, and try to reciprocate or reproduce that framework for different kinds of cases, right? And this is the place where usually people tend to fail. Like at least I had a big issue in these kind of cases where when it's completely unconventional, you have to somehow make sure that the structure that you frame at that moment on spot, because none of the structures would, like, I can't use the term revenue or cost when I'm talking about winning an election for my aspiring candidate Kalsik. That nothing makes sense. So can you try to have a good amount of structure on spot? Can you make a structure on spot? That how good are you in that area? Like that's the place where usually people tend to fail. And if you're good at that, then it's great. That's one place where I would say would be a good pitfall. And also other major pitfall that I personally faced is at places where I don't get a good structure, or where I don't get a good logical sense. I tend to list down points, right? For example, I think one of the places where I started solving the cases much like maybe in the month of August or something, I faced an issue. Like I think one of the places where I was stuck at was like airports have seen a decline in profits and blah blah blah. At some place, I started listing down all the factors. Like why could airports see a decrease in profits? Listing down or giving a big list of reasons why a profits are declining is a very very bad culture. I mean, you should not do that. If you try to give the same list in a more structured approach, like, hey, I look at this bucket first and I list down these points, then I look at this bucket and list down these points, that's much more efficient of way of solving cases. Don't tend to list down three, or like don't tend to randomly join down points, whatever you feel like, whatever is coming to your mind. Don't do that. Try to, whatever points you get, write it down, but try to frame a structure in such a way that you could try to bucket these points into like one to two to three sections, right? So make sections first and then put down points. That's the right way of doing it. What at least like people didn't do is like they think of all the possible reasons and then they write it down. They think of the headings for this and try to bucket it. That's not the right way. You think of the headings first and then try to write down the points under each of them. Like for example, what we have done here, company specific and person specific. I could nicely list down all the points of environment, culture, safety, money, home, satisfaction, workload, everything I could do. And I could still arrive at the answer, right? But that's not the right way. First, I was like, leaving job could be of two things, person specific and company specific. Once I have the headings, I'll sit down. So do the reverse way. Like always give the headings first and then go down to the points. Don't list down the points and go to the headings, right? So that's the other way of probably how you could improve case solving sessions, right? I think yeah, these two are the pitfalls I have, right? I think anything else, Ayush? Right? Yeah.
Yeah, like I think that was most of it. Like, does anyone have any doubts or something? Like anything from the session? Like any
Okay,
doubt?
I
Yes.
haven't received any DM, so
Uh,
Okay.
can I ask a doubt?
Sure, go
Yeah,
ahead.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so in this whole thing, we have been looking at it only in the quantitative aspect, right? If the problem was in a qualitative aspect, like at what point of time would we have figured that out?
Yes, good question. So the case that you have seen right now is actually qualitative. I mean, when you talk about qualitative, the only factors come into picture. There is no money or there's no numbers coming into the picture, right? So the case that Ayush gave before are places where you would see probably some amount of numbers coming in. In my case, or in the case that I've given, there's no quantitative numbers. But the question that you asked, where do we exactly know that numbers have to come into a role here? So this you could tell by the interviewer himself. I mean, like the interviewer definitely would prompt you to do the calculations or to do some kind of math if at all he thinks it's required, right? Usually, if a math is required, then he would be like, could you help? Like for example, the interviewer would be like, could you tell me what would be the variable cost per unit here? Or could you tell me what would be the fixed cost per unit here? Like he would, when he tends to ask such kind of questions, that he or she is indirectly trying to prompt you to do some kind of math and arrive at some quantitative way of solving the case, right? So usually if that's not the case, then the interviewer would be like, hey, we don't want you to go into the numbers. You could probably list down the factors and we'll look at numbers later. So always tend to always be open to the interviewer. Ask him that, do you want me to calculate this? Do you want me to estimate this? Do you want me to do that, right? If you tend to ask such kind of things, then you would definitely see that like the interviewer saying yes or no. By looking at the interviewer's pulse, you would understand that like, yes, I don't need to go here, or I need to go here, right? So I hope that's clear, right?
Yeah, that's clear. Also, like in this particular example, suppose if the problem was that the labors were not quite efficient.
Yes.
So at what point of time did we figure that out?
Yeah, I think that's a nice point. I mean, once the labors are not efficient, that means that we are firing the people, right? I mean, like that's the reason labors are not efficient, isn't it? I mean, like what will happen if labors are not efficient? That means that we are firing the people, and that's the reason we are hiring new people, right? So we would look into the if you look at the previous slide, go back to the previous slide, no, Rohan, once.
Yeah.
So you look at it, the firing rate has increased. So once the interviewer prompts me to go into this section of firing rate being increased, I would look at the reasons. Why are we firing people? So that's where our issue of the what issue that you have listed down, that is basically employees not being efficient, would come into this section. Since we have not gone to that section, since people themselves are leaving job, we have not gone to that area. I hope that's answered your question.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Any more doubts? Like any doubt?
Like, feel free to ask even the silliest of
Yes,
doubts,
please.
guys.
I mean,
It's
like,
okay.
yes, I mean, like when I was solving the case, I asked very basic. I mean, sometimes like I did even ask like, what comes under labor cost? I mean, like all these kind of very shitty questions also I asked, because it's okay. I mean, I don't think we will know it while we are solving. It all comes by practice. So please feel free to ask it.
Yeah.
Yeah, talking about silly questions, I might have one. So
Go ahead.
in the beginning of when the preliminary questions that we are going to ask, why
Mhm.
does geography come into the picture when we
Yes.
are talking about this?
Yeah, good question. I mean, very good question. So usually, I mean, what happens is laws or like local laws keep changing as geography changes. Sometimes what happens is like I've done multiple mistakes because I've not asked geography, right? So what happens is a case could be like let's say Reliance has plants in Gujarat and Bangalore, or like not Bangalore, Gujarat and someplace in Karnataka. Right. So, but you are seeing decrease in profits only in the Gujarat area. Then you will want to see why it has decreased the profits in Gujarat area. Maybe it could have been that the state of Gujarat has imposed some kind of state tax, which they are paying higher money to the government of state government, and Karnataka government has not imposed any such kind of issues. So they are saying that profits have decreased only from the Gujarat area, but not from the Bangalore or not from the Karnataka area, right? So understand the geography is important. Sometimes the what happens is the cases might go, like they would say location as international. I mean, when they say like, let's say like Europe area and Asia area, the laws or the local laws keep changing. So it's important for you to understand what area we are speaking, and if is there any issue with the geography that is there, right? That is the reason we ask area. I mean, once you try to solve more cases, especially the cases related to airline industry, usually tend to have issues of geography area. I mean, you would see that like flights taking off from particular area are seeing decrease in number of people. Let's say like flights from Pune are seeing decrease in number of people. That is because of, let's say, new trains have come from Pune to Mumbai. So people are preferring Pune to Mumbai train instead of Pune to Mumbai flight. So all these issues which mutually come in the airline industry and the industry where geography becomes an important area. But plants also, like the manufacturing plants also play some, they also we should also account for geography in these kind of issues. So it's always good to ask whether where it is located and do we have other locations, and are we seeing this trend in all the locations or any specific location. So these three questions you could always ask. They'll tend to form a good set of preliminary questions.
Okay, that clears my doubt. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I have this general doubt in profitability cases.
Sure.
So, like when we split profit into revenues and costs, and then
Mhm.
say we are first analyzing the revenue side,
Mhm.
and if we figure out that the price per unit has increased only for our company and has remained same for the competitors.
When you say price, you mean the selling price, right?
Yeah, selling
Okay,
price.
go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
So then, when we are analyzing the causes of that, at some point, what if we like, it could be due to the cost of something that
Yes.
has
Yes.
increased.
Yes.
So
Yes.
how is that
Uh,
me see? I mean,
Yes, yeah, got it. I mean, so that's why while I was solving the while I was explain the framework in the second slide, I told one point that there could be places where you would see revenue being decreased and costs also increased, right? So at this point of time, when you come to the place that like revenues have decreased and you realize that your prices of your particular product has increased, and the prices of your product has increased because the cost incurred for the product has increased, then you would be like, okay, you would tell the interviewer that, okay, hey, we have understood the price of the product has increased. This is solely because the increase in the cost have, this has been driven by the cost, the increase in the cost that we are incurring. So we will try to look at the cost section first and then come back to the revenue section required. We will always float this side to the interviewer, and interviewer would be like, okay, because when given an option to go with either revenues or costs, it is some what happens sometimes we would tend to go with revenue, and when we go with revenue we'll end up at realizing that like, okay, cost might be the issue which is causing this. So sometimes both will be correlated. So when you arrive at such kind of scenarios, it's okay to ask and tell the interviewer that yes, we have realized that the costs are the reason why it's actually costs are the major reason or the driving reason why we are seeing an increase in the selling price and we are seeing decrease in the profits. So let's look at the first cost section and look back and look back at revenues if there is anything else left out, right? So you can always shift in between if you want to, if you by telling the interviewer your approach, right? So that is okay. I mean, this issue I think most of us face, and we do this shifting in between. So it's fine, is what I feel.
Okay, yeah, got it.